So about 7 months ago, students of Hong Kong took to the streets in what's been called the Umbrella Revolution. They were protesting the anti-democratic behavior of their government, mostly around selecting candidates for an upcoming election. Now, what makes this particular protest unique was the role that technology played in it. What we see here is a candlelight vigil, but it's actually a cell phone candlelight vigil. And these cell phones and this light are more than symbolic. They were actually the engines for this protest. And what powered these engines was an app that was called FireChat. Now, FireChat's a chat app, much like the app that's on your phone, except when you chat with people on your phone, it goes through the telecommunication networks. And when you chat on your computer, it goes through the internet. But with FireChat, it uses what's called mesh networks. And the way it works is FireChat opens up and it looks for someone nearby you that also has FireChat, and it does a Bluetooth connection to that phone. Then that person connects to someone else with FireChat, and that person connects to someone else, and so on and so on. And that network, that connected network of phones, is a mesh network. And it exists temporarily, just for that moment in time, just those phones, just those people, and most importantly, outside of the telecommunication system. Now, why was this important for the protest? It was important because the government can't control that network. The government can't monitor that network. The government can't censor that network. Now, my question for you here today is this. What business do you think FireChat is in? Now, if you looked up FireChat in the App Store, you would find it next to WhatsApp, or you might find it next to Twitter. But actually, the case I want to make for you here today is that FireChat is not in the business you think it's in. That FireChat is actually in the business of disrupting the internet itself. That FireChat is an alternative communication network, an alternative to the internet, an alternative to telecom. Now, my second example I want to talk about today is Tesla. Tesla is probably considered one of the most successful electric car companies in history. And this year they did something that was just unprecedented. They took all their intellectual property, all of their IP, all of the patents, all of their secrets, and they put it out there for free. Anybody can have it. Now, why would you do that, right? Why would you take your core IP and put it out there for free? And the answer for Tesla is the same answer as it was for FireChat, because they are not in the business you think they're in. FireChat and Tesla are not in the business that you want them to be in. FireChat and Tesla, in fact, when you think about Tesla, Tesla is in a completely different business. Tesla, to understand it, you just need to look at Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla, to understand that he is far more interested in disrupting NASA or big oil than the big automakers. The business that Tesla is in power control, power generation, power storage, power transmission. Or think about this man, Xavier Niel. Xavier Niel is one of the most successful entrepreneurs in France. And about a year or so ago, he started a school in France called École 42. Now, École 42 is a college that focuses on programming. It's unique in three ways. First, it's entirely free. You don't pay a dime. Secondly, it has no teachers. It uses what he calls peer-to-peer pedagogy. And thirdly, everyone who graduates is guaranteed a job. Now, is he disrupting higher ed in France? Maybe. But he too is not in the business that we think he's in. Why Xavier Niel does this is because he wants to jumpstart the entrepreneurial ecosystem of France. He is in the business of startup technology. That's the business he's in. Now, consider a set of companies that we call the collaboration economy, and probably the poster child for these is Uber. Most of us know Uber as a transportation network. It takes people who want to get a ride and people who have a ride. They get together, both of them benefit. But Uber is not about being a taxi company. In fact, Uber is not in the taxi business at all. They are not in the business you think they're in. Uber is about getting something from point A to point B, anything, on demand. That business is called supply chain networks, and that's the business they're disrupting, not taxis. Or at the other end of the spectrum, consider a company called Yerdle. Now, Yerdle is a peer-to-peer marketplace for free cycling. So you've got something and you want to give it away. You get onto Yerdle and you put it up there, but Yerdle has its own currency. It has what's called Yerdle dollars. So you get Yerdle dollars for the stuff you want to give away, and then you use those Yerdle dollars to get something else that someone else wants to give away. It's literally a marketplace where you get what you give. Now, those dollars don't translate to US dollars. They're their own currency. The business Yerdle is in is ostensibly markets, but practically speaking, They're creating an alternative currency. They're disrupting central banks. Or consider Space Monkey. Space Monkey is an external hard drive. You get it, it sits on your desktop, it does all that stuff external hard drives do. It backs up your computer, it stores your files, but it's got this extra little hard drive in there. And what it does is it connects to other hard drives in other Space Monkey machines all over the internet, and it takes your stuff and it breaks it up into itty-bitty little bits and spreads it across the internet and backs it up. So that when your hard drive fails or you're not around your hard drive, you can just access your information. Now, is Space Monkey in the business that you think they're in? No, they're not. They're not in the hard drive business. They're about disrupting cloud computing. They're competing with Google. They're competing with the Amazon cloud. My last example is Bitcoin. Bitcoin, we've all heard of. It's this alternative currency. People use it instead of dollars. But really, to understand Bitcoin, you got to understand how it works. It uses this thing called the blockchain. And the blockchain is this network of people and computers that's a crowd all across the internet. And what the blockchain does is it verifies exchanges. In other words, when two people want to exchange something, the blockchain makes sure that the person who has one side of that exchange has what they need, and the person on the other side has what they need. And it verifies that. It's not just about financial exchange. In fact, a few weeks ago, the blockchain verified a wedding. The blockchain can verify any exchange. So what is Bitcoin disrupting? Is it disrupting currency? Certainly. But what Bitcoin is really about is disrupting any institution that validates exchange, right? That's governments. That's what Bitcoin is disrupting, right? Governments. So if we think about all the different companies I've talked about here today, Uber and Yerdle, Space Monkey, Bitcoin, all of them I've been talking about, there are two common themes that I want to focus on. All of these companies are collaborative in their processes and mesh in their structure. I'm going to say that again. They're collaborative in their process, they're mesh in their structure. Now let's look at the industry that I'm in. I'm in higher education, right? Higher education, we've been having some problems in trying to adjust to this new economy as well. And a lot of these problems were identified 40 years ago when Alvin Toffler talked about what he calls the 800th lifetime. That if we looked at all the new information being created, there would be this point, this demarcation line, after which all of this new information would become so large that no one person could actually process that information. That point is called the 801st lifetime. The problem is, higher education is designed for the first 800 lifetimes. It was designed in the 1800s. It's this German model that's all about the Industrial Revolution. It's all about those 800 lifetimes. And once we hit that 801st lifetime, the cracks around the seams of higher ed start to crumble because it just doesn't work anymore. Because now what we need to think about is filter, right? And what we're facing is what Clay Shirky calls filter failure. And the filter failure around this rise in information is to be placed at the doorstep, that blame at the doorstep of higher education, because it's still using a model that's simply untenable in the face of these things. And all of the time we're doing this, we're doing exactly what every institution does when faced with tectonic change. We're keep doing the stuff we've been doing all along, right? We doubled down on it. We said, okay, we see all this stuff happening. We're just going to move our courses online. We're going to digitize our lectures. We're going to put our stuff on the internet. And when that didn't work, we said, well, we'll just replicate our classrooms. But with replication instead of revolution, we just fail faster. And along the way, as we're doing this, all of these education startups start coming up, and they're driving the price of what we do down to zero. So now the challenge for higher education is how do we do what Kevin Kelly calls better than free? How can we make higher education better than free? And the answer to that is that we have to recognize that we too are not in the business you think we're in. We need to be taking cues from companies like Bitcoin and Uber and Space Monkey and Tesla and thinking differently about what we do. We need to look at education as a collaborative network and as mesh in structure. We need to do what I call mesh education. We need to build platforms that allow learners to collaborate as they choose and create ad hoc networks that come together and come apart, not university systems and silos and structures that are fixed. We need to create the 21st century conditions for learning, a petri dish, if you will. You know, an example of this is Minecraft, and I know you're thinking, isn't that a game? But it's not a game. Minecraft, in fact, is exactly an example of this petri dish I'm talking about. Minecraft is a collaborative platform. That's all it is. It's a place for people to collaborate, and they are collaborating to learn. Trust me. You can learn about history, math, programming, genomics, all of these things in Minecraft. And they're learning not from teachers, not the way you think of teachers. They're just learning from each other. And Minecraft is also an ad hoc network. Minecraft doesn't have a fixed and formal network. Any Minecraft computer can connect to another one and create a network on demand. It's the perfect example of what I mean when I say mesh education. So then, is there any role for teachers? What is the role for higher education in this space? Well, there is, but now the role is to create these collaborative platforms, to manage them, to direct them, to participate in them, to help design them, to put guide rails that keep people from going off the edges of them. Our job is to help create these ad hoc networks and make them fluid so things can come together and break apart as needed. There still is a role for an institution in this place. Even all the examples I'm talking about today, like FireChat, still requires some sort of institution. In FireChat, they validate accounts to make sure people are who they say they are. Or in Uber, they go through background checks of drivers to make sure that they're safe to drive cars. In Bitcoin, there are Bitcoin miners that validate the actual exchange to make sure that it's a legitimate exchange. There's always a role for an institution with these, just not in the way that you would normally think. So when we in the Armstrong Institute for Interactive Media Studies here thought about how we do this, how do we change what we do, we thought about what mesh education might look like. And we think it looks a lot like this. You should be able to look at a mesh education space and ask, are these teachers or are these students? Which one? Is this a business or is this a company? Is this a research lab or is this a classroom? If the space truly is collaborative in its processes and mesh in its structure, you shouldn't be able to tell the difference between either of those things. Now, the last startup I want to talk about here today, this one didn't do so well. This one failed. The government actually shut this one down. So there were these 6 guys, all about 30 years old or so. They got sick of higher education as it's been. They took it completely out of an education space, and they dropped it into a social space. They got rid of curriculum, and they made it all about interaction. The government shut them down. Now, the founder is this guy on the left, and his startup was called the Plato Academy. The point being, this isn't new. Mesh education and these concepts aren't new, but what happened between Plato and now is all these institutions started to get in the way. All these structures, all these beliefs, all these standards, and all of these things that we thought were making things better, but ended up simply making things worse and getting in the way. Now in the Web 3.0 world, there's this path through this. There's this path towards creating more effective, more democratic, and more open types of education. Mesh education allows you to do that. And so if higher education is going to endure, then it needs to embrace these things. It needs to grab onto them. It needs to build them. It needs to help them grow. And our jobs as educators are to do that. And in doing so, realize that we too are not in the business that we think we're in. We're not in the business of teaching. We're in the business of making meaning. Thank you.